Ready to start. We do have a quorum. There's Madame Zarillo. Okay, on screen. Okay. I will call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 29 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting, again, is taking place in a hybrid format, and I would expect all those participating in person to follow the protocols in place during the pandemic. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to take a few minutes for the benefit of witnesses and committee members. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. For those participating by video conference, please click on the microphone icon at the bottom of your surface to get my attention. Those witnesses and members participating have the option of choosing to speak in the official language of their choice. If interpretation is interrupted, please get my attention and we'll suspend while it is being corrected. I would remind as well, all comments should be directed through me, the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February the 3rd, 2022, the committee will resume its study of the Housing Accelerator Fund. I would like to welcome our witnesses to begin our discussions with 5 minutes of opening remarks, followed by questions. Attending is the Minister, Honourable Ahmed Hussein, the Minister of Housing, Diversity and Inclusion. From Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Romy Bowers, President Chief Executive Officer, Paul Mason, Senior Vice President, Client Operations, Bob Dugan, Chief Economist. We will start with Minister Hussein for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Minister, you have the floor, following which we will open to questions. Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Je suis ravi de participer.
I'm pleased to participate in the committee's study on the Housing Accelerator Fund.
It's all of our top concern, and we know that boosting housing supply is one of the main tools to address the housing affordability challenges facing Canadians. And that means increasing the supply of both market housing as opposed, in addition to and in combination with affordable housing, which require, quite frankly, different actions. Pour combler l'écart qui existe.
To fill the gap that already exists, and to keep up with our growing population over the next decade, Finance Canada and CHC made an initial estimate that Canada will need to build at least 3.5 million new homes by 2031. The recent budget of our government contains many elements aimed at increasing the supply more quickly. The measures that have been presented will address the breaks and delays in the housing system.
Category is the Housing Accelerator Fund. Budget 2022 proposes $4 billion in over 5 years, starting in 2022-2023, to launch the Housing Accelerator Fund. The target is to create at least 100,000 net new housing units over this period, with a focus on affordable housing with greater energy efficiency and on densification. The fund will do so by incentivizing communities to get more housing built. It will, for example, ensure that local governments get the support that they need to streamline and modernize their housing approval and delivery systems. Local governments are key partners for us in the housing system. This fund will strengthen partnerships and be flexible enough for the different needs and realities of cities and communities across the country, including in rural Canada. And when you talk to mayors across the country, they will tell you that they're facing barriers, and a lot of them don't have the fiscal capacity to overcome some of these needs, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is investments that are necessary to modernize permitting systems, introduce inclusionary zoning, and incentivize transit-oriented development. So the barriers that they're facing are real, and this fund will certainly help with that. So the Housing Accelerator Fund has already received support from right across the housing system, including from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Canadian Home Builders Association, and the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association, among others. We also heard widespread support for it at our recent National Housing Supply Summit. Le Fonds pour accélérer la construction de logements.
The Housing Accelerator Fund will join a suite of programs that CMHC has in place aimed at increasing market and affordable housing supply in Canada, which is all part of our national housing strategy.
Program already in place is the Federal Lands Initiative, which this committee is also looking at. This $200 million initiative launched in 2018 is intended to create 4,000 homes by transferring surplus federal lands and buildings to housing providers at low or no cost. Once transferred, the property is developed or renovated into affordable, sustainable, accessible, and socially inclusive housing. My mandate letter requests enhancements to the Federal Lands Initiative to ensure that the federal government is more effectively deploying its inventory of lands to advance the objectives of the National Housing Strategy. And once again, I want to thank this committee for looking at the Federal Lands Initiative and helping us get there. Just last week, for example, we announced that our government was providing nearly $3 million for the purchase and development of land at the former Canadian Forces Base Edmonton Griesbach Barracks site. This fund will assist in the development of more housing on the village of Griesbach in North Edmonton. This will include support for a proposed project of approximately 127 homes for Métis and other Indigenous members of the community and families, including 50 units dedicated to women and children fleeing gender-based violence. Residents will also have access to full on-time wraparound supports and cultural programming, counseling and childcare, and a community garden. It is stories like this that really show the success of the Federal Lands Initiative and the potential to do even more. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to be here today to talk about these programs. And I want to once again thank the committee for their study of both the Housing Accelerator Fund and the Federal Lands Initiative. Nous avons hâte de connaître les résultats.
We're eager to see the results of your study and to work together to continue working on settling the housing issues and housing affordability in this country.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Now, Madame Kusi, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for being here today. We've had many witnesses testify here that it's very important to differentiate between affordable housing and housing affordability. And it would seem, based upon your campaign promises for the last couple of elections, in fact, that this program was to address housing affordability as opposed to rather than affordable housing by creating middle-class homes. So would you agree then that one of the main reasons housing prices are skyrocketing across the country is due to a lack of market housing supply?
Thank you very much for the question. It's actually a very important question that allows me to kind of elaborate on the Housing Accelerator Fund. The fund is meant to do both. It is meant to unlock more housing supply of all types in Canada, period. And how is it going to do that? It is going to do that by recognizing, as we all do, that municipalities have a big role to play in permitting and development projects, zoning and urban planning and so on. So it is investing directly in eliminating the barriers that prevent the building of more housing supply, including more housing supply of middle-class housing.
And how would you define middle-class housing, Minister?
It is housing that is purchased by Canadians in the market. So it's market housing.
Okay.
But the fund is not just limited to that. The fund will unlock all types of housing, of course, with a bit of a preference and extra incentives for affordable housing. Having said that, When you make permitting easier and more efficient, when you make zoning more reasonable, when you encourage intensification and transit-oriented development, it will inevitably unlock more housing supply across the spectrum, including market housing.
Okay, so then according to your definition of middle-class housing, how many middle-class homes has your government's programs under the National Housing Strategy built to date, would you estimate?
I will turn to my official, Romy Bowers, but before I answer that, I would highlight the fact that, our programs are, of course, the National Housing Strategy programs are geared towards affordable housing. With the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, we build more rental stock, period, with a percentage of affordable rental units, but also just putting more rentals on the market because not a lot of developers prefer to build rent. Housing Accelerator Fund is different. This is about systems change. This is about investing in the capacity of communities to build more. We know those barriers are real. We know that it takes too long to approve and deploy and deliver housing projects, and we want to help by incentivizing that faster building of more supply. But I'll turn to President Romy Bowers for more details.
That's fine, Minister. I'll move on to my next question, please. So your budget claims then CMHC projects the need for 3.5 million homes in the next 9 years. Yet according to a Scotiabank report, Canada needs 1.8 million new homes a year to keep up with the population growth. So in your opinion, that's a vastly different number, between what you're projecting and the CMHC is projecting. Why is that so?
The number that you refer to is what you're referring to, our ambition, the supply of new homes. As the Prime Minister has indicated, our target is to double the number of homes built in Canada. We have the fastest growing population in the G7 countries, but our housing supply hasn't kept up with that demand. And so what we're saying is we will use the Housing Accelerator Fund and other incentives through, for example, our infrastructure investments to encourage more housing supply. But that's not the end of the story. I mean, there's a role for provincial governments to also increase housing supply, and you've seen reports and expert panels coming from different provinces indicating that they are focused on this issue. Municipalities also are engaged in this. Private sector is also part of the mix, and so are affordable housing proponents. So this is a whole of country approach, but what we are saying is we will have a national leadership and investments to encourage more supply.
Thank you, Minister. To the CMHC, I note here that you're using population statistics from 2016 to create housing supply projections. And so I am uncertain as to where the 3.5 million homes in 9 years come from. But for my last minute, I'm going to turn to the question about the needs for funds to flow immediately. And how it has been stated in the past that perhaps CMHC could be better in terms of allowing funds to get out the door. So first I'll ask the CMHC, actually since I have very little time left, I'll ask the CMHC, do you agree that funds need to be able to flow immediately, and what is your plan to do that?
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Chair. I agree absolutely that CMHC needs to do everything we can to ensure that funds get out very quickly to the Canadians who need the funding to create additional housing supply. CMHC is committed to always improving our processes, and since the start of the National Housing Strategy, we have improved our processing times very quickly, and we intend to take the learnings from some of the more recent programs that we've implemented, like the Rapid Housing Initiative, to ensure that the learnings from those programs are applied to the Accelerator Fund.
Thank you, Madame Kusi. Mr. Long for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues. And Minister, thank you for coming again to HUMA. I just want to say I very much appreciate your grasp of the file, your knowledge of the file, and certainly your passion. It comes through in spades, and we need somebody like you to address one of the major challenges our country is facing. So thank you for that. I want to talk to you, Minister, about the historic $4 billion investment in housing through the Accelerator Fund. Over the course of the pandemic, we've seen thousands of Canadians move from bigger cities to smaller centers, cities certainly like my beautiful riding of St. John, Rothesay, and they're coming there in search of affordable housing. As a result, we've seen, I think all of us have seen rents increase. Renters, particularly seniors and families, without access to housing that they can afford. And home prices have risen rapidly and become unaffordable for many first-time home buyers. We know the root of the problem is a lack of adequate supply of affordable housing to meet this unprecedented, rapidly increasing demand. And we know that municipalities will play a key role, a vital role, in addressing this supply shortage. But smaller cities, like my city of St. John, lack the administrative capacity to take action on housing that larger cities have. We've heard about the importance of this fund being flexible and taking into account that the needs of cities like St. John will be different than larger cities. I know when the witnesses testified, our mayor, Donna Node Reardon, talked about the challenges that cities the size of St. John will face. Can you speak at how the Accelerator Fund will address the distinct needs of smaller centres like St. John and take full advantage of funding that we can offer? Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the honourable member for the important question with respect to the Housing Accelerator Fund. And he points to a really important lens and an important perspective that we hope to bring to the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is that the Housing Accelerator Fund has to be deployed differently in different communities. And so they all communities, even including larger cities, they all have challenges with respect to barriers around faster processing of development applications and permitting and so on. But I think the capacity issues are even more pronounced in smaller communities, in mid-sized cities, in rural Canada. And my commitment is to make sure that as we deploy the Housing Accelerator Fund, we make sure that we bring a rural lens, a smaller community lens, a mid-city size lens, a regional lens to its execution, so that we have enough flexibility in the Housing Accelerator Fund to address both the needs of large urban centers and smaller cities and communities. And my belief is that there are some common barriers between the two sized communities, but there's also some unique barriers that are unique to smaller communities. And so one community, for example, of a larger urban center may have a barrier of moving towards digitization of its permitting system, whereas the smaller community might not even have enough permitting officials, period, or they may lack the capacity to put together a plan. So we have to make sure that the Housing Accelerator Fund is used in all parts of Canada, because housing is now a national challenge. It's not just a big city challenge facing Canadians. And so the Housing Accelerator Fund has to reflect that. And I want to emphasize once again, it's about investing in the systems change, so that when at the end of the life cycle of the funding, the changes will be sustainable and they will continue to unlock new housing supply, and including affordable housing.
Minister, while affordable housing organizations in my riding also lack capacity of those in larger cities, I'd say they punch above their weight. And together, we have had success in delivering significant federal funding for affordable housing projects in St. John, Rothesay, thanks to our government's national housing strategy. But one challenge affordable housing proponents in my riding often face is the administrative burden and delays associated with applying for funds through CMHC. Can you speak to how this fund will build on the success of the Rapid Housing Initiative in this regard to ensure that the application process is quick, flexible, and as accessible as possible? Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I will say is we've learned a lot through the success of the Rapid Housing Initiative, and it landed really well. And there's many folks who believed that we couldn't deliver housing in less than 12 months, and the Rapid Housing Initiative has put to bed those concerns. I think we've learned a lot through that process, and we've managed to make sure that those lessons. We will obviously make sure that those lessons are embedded in the Housing Accelerator Fund, and that we are flexible enough to ensure that smaller communities that smaller communities benefit as much as larger communities. And one of the ways to address that is to make sure that the application process is more flexible and reasonable.
Thank you, Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Ministre.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, thank you for being here. Since the beginning of our study, we have heard extremely interesting witnesses who spoke to the new program that has been put in place. And we're trying to better understand the issue of affordable housing. One of our witnesses, in one of these recommendations, said that simply increasing the housing supply does that not automatically signify that there will be more affordable housing available as well, nor will there be more affordable rental units available. It is therefore key that the efforts of all levels of government specifically focus on the creation and availability of affordable rental units, which is in higher demand than the market for houses, which self-regulates. The rental housing market, that is, people who rent are 3 times more likely than owners to have serious housing demands. So what we've seen in Quebec and in Canada, it's more of an issue that affects the rental housing market. A witness even told us that if we want to address the issue of affordable housing, that is not the right program. It's a program that acts more on supply rather than demand, and there's a demand for affordable rental housing. And devoting only 30% to this is not enough. So since we are looking at the options, that's $4 billion over 5 years, how can we truly meet with that demand and not simply take measures on the supply, which will have little or no effect on the availability of affordable rental units? Thank you. Thank you for your question. It's an important question.
First of all, I'll say that this is not the only program that will result in more affordable rental housing. We actually have a much bigger program called the Rental Construction Financing Initiative that has grown over the years and is now projected to invest $25 billion over a number of years to ensure that we're building more rental stock or incentivizing the building of more rental units across the country. And in Budget 2022, that program will double the requirement for the number of affordable units from 20% to 40%. That means that more affordable rental units will be in the market on top of more rental units, period. And why is the Government of Canada incentivizing the building of more rental units? It's because developers don't tend to mostly build for the rental market. They tend to build for ownership. So there's a shortage of rental units across Canada, and our government has recognized that the federal government has a role to encourage more rental units being built. But if I come back to the Housing Accelerator Fund, I would say that one of the ways it will lead to more rental units is the encouragement and incentivization of densification and inclusionary zoning. When you allow more units to be built within the same amount of land, you unlock more rental housing supply. So there's municipalities, for example, some mayors that I met recently who are moving towards allowing more units within a single-family home, for example. Now, the idea behind that is to allow the owner of a large single-family unit with a huge backyard to be able to build up to 5 units and allow some of those units to be rented,
Monsieur le
therefore
ministre, j'aime
tripling or
pas ça, vous
quadrupling
êtes
the
un
rental
ministre, j'aime
supply.
pas ça couper la parole.
Minister, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't like cutting you off, but I have very little time. However, if there's a need, and I think this is a serious need in municipalities, whether this be in Quebec or Ontario, there is a need, and that is for housing. And it's not only for, that is for rental housing. That's the need that needs to be met. So among the options that you're delivering under the new program, you're saying that it isn't focused on that. But if we don't do that, we won't meet with the demand. So how to ensure that this new program will meet those needs that are more for affordable rental housing rather than just for housing?
In fact, the Housing Accelerator Fund will, among other things, unlock more affordable housing supply. When I talk about affordable housing, it is deeply subsidized rental rates for local, yes, in communities that now don't have enough affordable housing. So this will allow renters to be given deeply affordable housing by unlocking more supply also of affordable housing. Yes, it's part of the Housing Accelerator Fund.
Dans quel pourcentage pourriez-vous nous le dire? Ou...
Could you perhaps produce the percentage? Is it more than 30%? Is it 50 or 60% for affordable rental housing?
It is encouraging the building of that. It is part of the plan. So what we are seeking from municipalities is to bring forth a plan to tackle the systemic barriers, but to also show a roadmap to build more affordable housing, more affordable rental housing, and more intensification around transit.
Mr. Minister, Madame Chabot. Madame Zerillo for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Minister for for coming to the committee today. What we're doing is not working. The market-driven lens that we're putting this through isn't working, and we're losing affordable housing at a rate of 15-1 in this country, and we can never catch up with what we're doing right now. It's like trying to get up a down escalator the wrong way. We are never going to get to the top. So my question to the minister is, REITs right now are acquiring buildings, rental buildings, which we mentioned are needed and also developers don't necessarily want to build. REITs are acquiring buildings that offer affordable rent and then demolishing them. Studies have shown that we're losing these housing units so fast and we're failing people. Would the minister support a moratorium on REITs until we fully understand the impact of people of taking away their housing and community? And I just want to share, in my community, REITs are now going after stable housing for seniors and persons with disabilities, and they have nowhere to go. Minister, I have been in the homes of single moms with children with disabilities, seniors that are asking me to find them a long-term care home to go into, and they've been tricked by these developers that they need to get out before even a rezone is happening. So I guess I just want to understand, how are we going to protect affordable housing? If we're losing it at 15-1, we are never catching up.
Mr. Chair, I want to begin by highlighting the fact that it is our government that has brought forward a 1% tax on the value of non-resident, non-Canadian owned residential real estate. And we've committed to reviewing the tax treatment of real estate investment trusts that the member refers to. But I want to go back to the prelude to the question, saying that our government has taken market lens to our national housing strategy. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are the government that actually has brought in a human rights framework into the national housing strategy, a legislative framework. We are the government that has introduced a number of different programs to build more affordable housing. And while we're doing that, we recognize there's more work to be done. That's why we've brought in the Canada Housing Benefit that is literally helping hundreds of thousands of Canadians obtain direct rental supports so that they don't end up on the street. So we recognize that there's more work to be done, but to characterize our efforts over the last number of years as being driven by the market is completely not true. And I really want to challenge the premise of the question. Yes, we have to tackle financialization. Yes, we've banned foreign investors from purchasing Canadian residential real estate for 2 years. That will provide more homes for Canadians. But we are the government that is Rapid Housing alone has delivered 10,250 deeply, deeply affordable homes, 100% federal grants that have been provided to communities to build deeply affordable housing. So we have done a lot, informed by a human rights approach, and we're the government that appointed a housing advocate and a housing council, and we'll do more. But I think it's unfair to say that we're being guided by the market. That is absolutely not true.
Minister, you and I stood in a parking lot on a housing announcement where 3 buildings heavily supporting Syrian immigrants, Syrian refugees that came to my riding of Coquitlam that lost their housing based on a market approach to making land go through a development lens. The developers needed to go for density, extra density, bonus density. We had to do land transfers with perfectly livable purpose-built rental where immigrants that had recently come, refugees came to this country that were displaced. I stood in those homes, Minister, and I'm telling you that I've seen it on the ground, that we are looking at this through a market lens. I don't have much time, so I want to talk about accessible housing. When I was first elected, I asked for an order paper on accessible housing. And accessible housing, I asked about what we're losing. CMHC came back and said CMHC does not collect data on accessible units that have been lost or decommissioned. I would ask the minister if we are keeping track of what we are losing in this effort to fill the supply gap.
I'll turn the attention of the honourable member to the fact that in the National Housing Strategy, every single project that seeks to get money from the federal government to build housing, whether it's private sector, government, another order of government, or the nonprofit sector, we have minimum accessibility requirements. So unless they fulfill accessibility requirements from our government, they don't get a single dime from us. And since we came into office, we've built 36,000 units of accessible housing across Canada. We're investing in the development of more inclusive and accessible communities through the National Housing Strategy. The Affordable Housing Innovation Fund is encouraging projects to come forward to innovate more accessibility. And barrier-free housing for Canadians with disabilities is a priority of the National Housing Strategy and will always be, including in the Housing Accelerator Fund.
Do I have more time, Mr. Chair?
You have 14 seconds. A short question that could go on the record, Madame Zerillo.
Sure. So I've got the stats here on CMHC asking about the decommission of accessible housing. We didn't collect data until 2017, it looks like here. For those first 3 years, there really was nothing done. Maybe in the last 2 years, 20 and mostly 2021, there was any movement. So perhaps the minister would just like to update why we didn't collect data before 2017 on CMHC on accessible units. Thank you.
Sir, if you could provide the information written to the committee, that would be...
Yeah, I will turn it to CMHC to provide that information.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Madame Zerillo. Now, I believe it's Mr. Ruff that next. 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My question's to the officials, CMHC. I think actually Mr. Mason's likely the best one to answer it. I got some not-for-profit organizations that are overseeing affordable housing builds in my riding, but they're running into the issues that, some of it's tied to high inflation, supply chain issues tied to the pandemic. They're getting delays, the increased interest rates now. But these organizations have mortgages that must be approved by CMHC. But however, because their previous negotiated approvals are no longer available or meeting the interest rates now that they've going up, they're being told they can't negotiate directly with CMHC but through their lender, and they must buy down the interest rates down to 3.5% to the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm just asking, what are the options available to these groups, to these not-for-profits, to actually carry on with these projects when they can't negotiate, they don't have the money? What are the options available to them?
Thank you very much for that question. And we recognize that the current uncertainties in the current economic environment put great pressure on housing providers, particularly those in the nonprofit sector. I think the best advice that I can provide your constituents is to give the local CMHC representative a call. We work with clients on a day-to-day basis to address specific issues or concerns that they're having with their files, and we're very happy to talk to them and also intercede with the lender to determine what things we can do within our authority. So I would really encourage your proponents to contact us, and we'll provide the list of the representatives responsible for your riding, and we can continue with the discussions with them.
Well, thanks, Ms. Bowers. I'll likely quote you on that because they're being told that they cannot negotiate directly with CMHC. They must go through the lender. So anyway, I'd appreciate clarity. Feel free to follow up. But Chair, I will cede the remaining part of my time to Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leipert, you have the floor for a little over, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Minister. Since this government took over, we've heard a lot about how much money has been spent on housing. I think what has been lacking, though, is real detailed outcomes. I hear you as a minister and the minister previous throwing numbers around, 40,000, 30,000, whatever, but I've never really seen where that is actually justified. And one of the concerns, first of all, I think what you're attempting to do here with this fund is the right thing to do, because if you talk to anyone in the construction business, their number one frustration is getting through all the regulations and the approvals and all of those sorts of barriers at the municipal level. So taking action to try and clear out some of those roadblocks, I think, is the right thing to do. But again, I'm wondering, how do you plan to ensure that there are specific outcomes, specific goals achieved, so that we're not just throwing more money at something that we really don't know whether at the end the kinds of results that we would hope would be attained are actually attained?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a great question, and I would point the member to our track record with other investments. If you look at the Rapid Housing Initiative, in a very, very short amount of time, we were able to conclude agreements with nonprofit organizations as well as municipal governments to deliver housing and to deliver it within 12 months or less. And they all stepped up and did it. And the reason we were able to do that is because we had binding agreements with them. In all the different programs of the National Housing Strategy, we actually sign agreements with proponents to make sure that they keep up their end of the bargain with respect to affordability, accessibility, and energy efficiency. This will be exactly the same. The only difference is we're now investing in systems as opposed to a straightforward project. So we will obviously, on a broad scale, we will require that particular municipality or that particular regional government or whoever is responsible for the permitting and delivery of housing to bring forth a roadmap of what are the challenges in that particular community to build housing, to increase housing supply, and to do it faster. Once they identify those challenges, they also have to provide to us a roadmap of how to overcome those challenges and what it would take to overcome those challenges, and basically draw a before and after picture. So you have one permitting official in your city, and you give out 100 permits a year. If we provide you with a second permitting official and we pay the salary, we expect at least 200 permits to be issued in that community, for example, right? I mean, so those outcomes will be part of the systems planning that we would demand in that agreement, and it will be a binding agreement.
Could you make the commitment, though, that in some form you would give updates on a every 6-month basis or something, so we know that the funds are actually going to where they're supposed to go?
Yes, not only that, we would have the power to design the funding in such a way that it is based on keeping commitments and making sure that that there's leverage in our agreements to make sure that people are keeping their commitments as part of the agreement. And as I said, this is an investment in systems, but the systems improvements have to result in better and faster output of housing, including affordable housing. That will be identified in collaboration with the local community, and we will certainly hold them to account to make sure they meet those benchmarks.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Leipert. Now to Mr. Collins for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And Minister, welcome today. You continue to do an excellent job. And I think everyone, irrespective of what side of the house you're on, understands that you're very passionate about affordable housing. And thank you for your attendance today to assist. But my questions today are for CMHC reps, Mr. Chair. So if I could, through you, I should start with, I have questions that I'm going to submit to the clerk that I'll ask CMHC to answer, after our meeting concludes. I had the opportunity, obviously, as a municipal representative to sit on our municipal housing board for a number of years, 13 years. The last 7, I acted as president of City Housing Hamilton. And I have to say that my experiences as an elected official with CMHC in the application process for a number of different programs that CMHC has offered over the years was a very frustrating one. And so I made a commitment that if I made my way to Ottawa one day, that I would raise these issues. And so here's my opportunity. And so if I could, through you, Mr. Chairman, we in Hamilton had a number of projects that on the books where we had the opportunity to apply to the co-investment fund, as well as the innovation fund, and in a number of other areas. Rapid housing, I think, if there's an Academy Award for housing programs, that one takes home all the Oscars. But I have to say some of the other programs, it was very frustrating. And I've heard the same from not-for-profits here locally in Hamilton. Had the opportunity annually to visit and attend the ONFA conference, where it's a meeting of housing providers from across the province who meet and share their experiences. And I have to say that the experiences that many have and the comments that they have to relay about CMHC, again, a frustrating one. And so today I have some questions about, we're talking about modernizing the application process for municipalities through the Accelerator Fund. And I really think there should be some attention, maybe even taking some of those resources and providing them to CHC so that CMHC can use those funds to modernize its own application process. I can say that, the comments from my municipality, that we experienced significant issues with the application process that led to not just delays, but unnecessary costs for us. And that's in stark contrast to the experiences that we've had with FCM and the Green Municipal Fund that was offered to us. A very easy, seamless process for our staff and for our council, and the funds flowed much quicker than they did for the co-investment fund. And I have to say that in dealing with the co-investment fund, we found the vetting process to be, I think the word our staff used was excruciating. We experienced many delays. We were forced to submit, I think it was 25 submission packages through the projects that we were dealing with as it relates to the co-investment fund. We had 75 or more distinct documents. And so you can imagine when you're asked for additional information as part of your submission, you have to go back out to an architect. You have to go back out to an engineer. You have lawyers that then have to revise all those documents and submit them. And so a lot of time, a lot of extra funds that we essentially didn't have. And when you're dealing with not-for-profits, they're in a much different situation because they don't have the funds and the resources that municipalities have. And so I have to say that, I'd like your comment on through you, Mr. Chairman, to the representatives, do you ever do a satisfaction survey with those that apply for funds through any program through CMHC? I'll start with that.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. And the first thing I'd like to say is, I'd like to apologize on behalf of CMHC for the difficulties that your constituents have had. CMHC had not been in the business of providing direct delivery of housing. So definitely in the initial phases of the national housing strategy, there were a lot of growing pains and lessons learned. So I just want to start off by saying that my most sincere apologies for some of the things that you described. Having said that, we have learned a lot through our experiences. We do survey our clients on an ongoing basis, and we take that feedback into account in improving our processes. We, for every transaction, we measure what's called a Net Promoter Score, which is basically a measure of client satisfaction with the process. And we've seen gradual improvement in that over time, and we're actually quite pleased with where we are right now. We've learned a lot, as I mentioned previously, from things like the Rapid Housing Initiative. I think that program was rolled out very quickly, and it's our intention to make sure that standard that was established in the Rapid Housing Initiative be implemented in other programs going forward. This is not to say we're perfect, and we continue to be a learning organization. And I really appreciate you bringing these type of issues to my attention, so that we can continue to learn and become better. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think I'm out of time. I will add the questions that I have outstanding to the list that I'll provide to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Unless I have more time.
No, you're both you and Mr. Leipert were over, but it's fair questions. Madame Chabot, actually we will conclude with Madame Chabot and Madame Zerillo for the first hour. So Madame Chabot for 2.5 minutes.
2 minutes et demie?
2.5 minutes? Yes. Thank you, Minister. My first question regards the budget, and it's about Indigenous housing in rural and urban settings outside of reserves. So we've conducted a major study here on this national strategy for Indigenous peoples in reserves. And the strategy was created, but in the last budget, it's 300 million only that is earmarked for this strategy over 5 years. So if I may, I'd like to quote the Quebec Housing Associations. We saw the launch of this national strategy, and the first time this happened was in 2017. Finally, the budget announced that the government will go ahead with an Indigenous strategy. However, the ridiculous amount that they're earmarking to us, that's $300 million over 5 years, is almost a slap in the face with respect to the serious needs of Indigenous communities living outside of reserves. And it is true that in the study of this that we did in committee, this was a major need, and we wanted to make sure that the strategy would be developed by and for Indigenous peoples. So given this desperate need, how do you explain this terribly low sum, if I may? It's too ridiculous a sum to answer any needs. Thank you for your question.
Absolutely. Our government is committed to an urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy informed by a for Indigenous, by Indigenous principle. And, you know, the National Housing Council issued recommendations as well, and we're fully committed to co-developing and implementing a dedicated urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy. The fact that there was $300 million is a start, but let me remind the honourable member that in a number of our programs to build and repair deeply affordable housing, we already prioritize Indigenous housing projects, including urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing projects off reserve. For example, the Rapid Housing Initiative has resulted in 41% of all the projects being delivered in Indigenous communities, including in urban, rural, and northern Indigenous communities.
Monsieur le ministre, c'est vraiment insuffisant.
Minister, it's really insufficient. We've estimated the housing needs for these communities only in Quebec at more than 50,000. So how to achieve this? How to say, yes, we're going to take care of this, and at the same time reserve such low sums to meet that need? I think some accounts will have to be, some reckoning will have to take place.
First of all, that this is a start. The National Housing Council report had a number of really important recommendations. We're fully committed to implementing all of the recommendations. In addition to that, Indigenous housing projects and proposals are already prioritized in the $13 billion co-investment fund, as well as programs like the Rapid Housing Initiative. But we have to do more, I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, and I would remind the committee members that we are focused on the Housing Accelerator Fund with this study. Madame Chabot for 2.5 minutes to end this first round.
Madame Cirillo.
Madame, who did I say?
Thank you.
Madame
Minister,
Cirillo, my apologies.
No worries. Thank you very much. Minister, you spoke of minimums in the accessible housing for projects to get federal funding. I'm wondering, what is the definition of accessible housing to meet the criteria?
Mr. Chair, I would turn to Madam Bowers of CMHC to answer that particular question.
So with respect to the Accelerator Fund, we're still in the process of determining the exact features of the program, but at a minimum, the accessibility features would be aligned with the features that were described earlier by the minister that applies to all our NHS programs.
Okay, so I'm looking for a little bit more definition around what accessible would mean. I've got some experience that it's very hard to get the development community to buy into universal design or accessibility features and even amenities in buildings around accessibility. So do you have any other expansion that you could share on what accessible might look like?
So you said that it's difficult to have the development community do those things. Well, it's very simple. If they want to access federal funds to build affordable housing, affordable rental housing, and so on, they have to. It's not a choice. They have to meet those accessibility standards. So whether they like it or not, it is a commitment that our government has made, and we've so far kept that commitment in every program of the National Housing Strategy.
Thank you, Minister. And so what are those accessible features? And the reason I'm asking is some of those accessible features, even in regards to parking regulations, have actually been downloaded to municipalities, and then it's a council by council decision, a bylaw by bylaw decision about even exterior accessibility outside of the buildings in some areas.
I would turn to Madam Bowers again.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, I'll take that question away. We can provide the accessibility definitions for each of our programs. We'll provide that by separate cover, and very, very happy to respond to any further questions that MP Cirillo would have on this matter.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm just going to take this last minute just to talk about the GST exemption that was promised a while back. And it's my understanding, even from those that I've spoken to in the Liberal Party, that this GST exemption was forfeited in favor of lower credit for larger developers. They asked for lower credit. They said that would be more beneficial to them. I just wanted to let the minister know that in my riding, we forgave, one of the developers came in with a purpose-built rental unit. They owned the land. They asked for some lessening in parking regulations so that they could build a purpose-built rental unit, expecting almost $500,000 in GST exemption, and it never came. It seems that the lack of GST exemption for the smaller developers, for those that already own land, for those that have been renting out their buildings for 20, 30, 40 years, they will immediately owe GST as soon as they rent their first unit. It puts them at a disadvantage to the larger development community who can go ahead and pre-sell units. It's incentivizing market condos over rental units. And I wonder if there is any talk about revisiting this GST exemption to encourage more purpose-built rental and to even save some of the purpose-built rental that we have right now.
I would encourage the member to look at the track record of the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, a program that provides 100% financing to folks who are building rental stock. And in Budget 2022, in response to stakeholders and members of the opposition, we are doubling the affordability of the units from 20% of all the units built through RCFI to 40%. And I hope that the member can support that process.
Madame Zerillo. And thank you, Minister, for appearing before the committee on an issue that is certainly very much in the forefront today, and as well as the officials from CMHC. You can sense from the questions given here that members have a lot of interest on this particular file. With that, we will suspend for a few moments while we transition to the final round and get the witness online. Thank you again, Mr. Minister. We'll suspend for... We could get your attention to come back to the meeting. We'll call it back to order as our time is restricted. My apologies to the witnesses for the late start, but we were held with votes in the Commons. So actually, I'm going to go directly to opening statements and welcome the three witnesses. Monsieur Eric Simon, Director General, Association des Groupes de Ressources Techniques de Québec. Jeff Morrison, Executive Director, Canadian Housing and Renewal Association, and Canadian Real Estate Association, Michael Burke. I would ask you have 5 minutes for opening statements. If you could keep them within that context, it would be great to give our members a chance to question you, because we will be stopping at about 20 after 5. So we'll begin with Monsieur Simon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for welcoming us as part of the committee's work and to enable us to contribute to the Housing Accelerator Fund. Let me begin by introducing ourselves. We're an association that brings together 25 technical resources groups that service all of Quebec. We are social economy organizations. In more than 40 years, we've supported the creation of more than 86,000 housing units as cooperatives and housing organizations that are nonprofit. We therefore contribute to social development in Quebec. We're also involved in many rental housing units, such as in different municipalities. We're at the heart of housing development, and we've been there for 40 years, and we're part and parcel of all steps of building. We are catalysts to undertake housing units that meet with the different needs of the most vulnerable people. First of all, the creation of a fund to foster housing development is good news. There are tremendous needs and the challenges are major. It's important to mention that the role of government in housing development, first and foremost, should focus on housing for vulnerable and low-income people. There are limited resources, therefore we have to prioritize. And I'd say more. Investments has to be sustainable and well organized to foster development of social and community housing. The only model that makes it possible to maintain sustainability throughout the life cycle of a building. Therefore, profitable private housing is not an option, and it will simply move forward any problems. What we're really lacking to build housing, of course, is money. Not so much money as part of a support program or a parallel program. We need a unique program which in and of itself makes it possible to carry through projects. We have moved from one source of funding to carry out projects to 4 to 5 different sources. So we're simply seeing increased criteria and more work. We're seeing an increase in delays as well. We need to build housing quickly as well. We need to do things right. The delays to build a project in the best possible solutions from step 1 to the end is 3 years. Under some programs, it takes 45 years. And when there's no financing, it takes more than 6 years. So to establish unrealistic timelines, of course, will affect the answer we give to the needs, and it puts increased pressure on promoters and vulnerable groups we're seeking to help. There are tremendous needs. In our network, only in Quebec, as at 31st December 2021, we had 10,811 housing units that were not completed simply because there was not enough money. And once again this year, over 10,000 units are being built in our system and have no funding. So the federal government solution to reach these objectives has to be focused on the different particularities of each region. An approach can only be efficient to the extent that standards are applied from one ocean coast to coast. The needs and realities are different, therefore the measures must be different. In Quebec, we have a housing ecosystem that is very solid, and we work together with organizations having complementary missions. Applying this model in the last 2 years in Quebec was greatly appreciated. We have co-investments. We had ICRL in the Quebec government's intervention measures had made it possible to unlock many housing projects that were underfunded in Quebec. So bringing together federal funds and existing funds has been efficient. However, we must ensure that negotiation for these funds do not take too many years. Not everything can be solved through these matching funds, but we need to have quicker agreements because we're dealing with the same groups of people. Other than money to carry out projects, there is the support and the support provided to developers, to promoters. That through that, any nonprofit organization or promoter developer would have enough money to meet these needs. So these organizations existed previously in Canada, but only a few of us are left in Quebec. Everywhere we have our association that services all of the territory. Their social economy is a representative of the community that it's based in. And we need such a network across Canada that would make it possible to put in place better measures and to focus on community needs. As well, in the history of housing in Quebec, the best programs and measures were carried out by co-building. We have community organizations with us worked in hand to develop efficient, realistic, and achievable projects. So speeding up projects can also be based on this kind of partnerships with CMHC. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Monsieur Simon. Now, Mr. Morrison, for 5 minutes or less.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the committee for the invitation. For those unfamiliar with the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association, we are the national voice for the social, nonprofit, and affordable housing sector in Canada. Our members include social supportive housing providers, municipal housing organizations, and 12 of 13 provincial and territorial housing departments. Votre étude était axée sur deux programmes qui, selon nous,
Your study focuses on two programs which we believe are an important element of the National Housing Strategy. Very quickly now, I would like to share our thoughts as to how these two programs could be put in place and changed in order to foster a greater affordable housing stock.
$1 billion Accelerator Fund, which was introduced in Budget 2022, was with a promise to fund changes to municipal systems and policies that are preventing more housing from being built. In January 2022, in anticipation of this announcement, CHRA held a consultation session with our members to get their input on the most effective uses for this fund. We captured these ideas in a letter to Minister Hussen, which was sent in February, and we've provided a copy of that letter to the clerk. I'll highlight just a few of the recommendations contained in that letter. So first, one of the biggest local barriers to housing development is a lack of human resource capacity within municipal planning and approval departments. Housing providers told us that applications often take so long to get approved simply because there aren't enough trained people to evaluate them. We'd recommend that one of the uses of the fund be to increase the number of staff in municipal approvals and planning departments and actually fund training and accreditation programs for them. Second, we know that NIMBYism can be a huge hurdle in developing new housing, particularly community and social housing. Some municipalities have taken steps to combat NIMBYism by putting in place anti-NIMBY campaigns or by providing more information to local communities on the impacts of social housing, or reforming public consultation processes, such as what they've done in Victoria, BC. But these efforts take resources. We would recommend that initiatives designed to address NIMBYism also be eligible under the fund. Third, one of the most onerous aspects of affordable housing development is the misalignment between housing programs and policies between different orders of government. Oftentimes, community housing providers are forced to navigate between multiple programs at different levels of government, each with their own application criteria, timelines, funding levels, and so forth. It's a situation that one of my members actually called trying to organize the world's worst Tinder date. The Accelerator Fund could be used to provide the human and technological resources to allow orders of government to create one-stop shop approaches where program criteria and application processes are aligned. Models such as this actually exist, for example, between the City of Calgary and CMHC. But again, these approaches require resources to implement. By including such an activity as eligible under the fund, the Accelerator Fund could accelerate more aligned, streamlined processes to be put in place. Un dernier point sur le fonds d'accélération.
One last point about the Accelerator Fund. We recommend that the priority in this fund be devoted to projects designed to speed up and foster community and affordable housing. Given that housing providers outside of the market often require more complicated partnerships on a municipal level compared to the market housing, and this is the declared objective by Parliament in its law on the right to housing in 2019, which consists in providing priority to housing to vulnerable populations. We believe that any proposal aimed at accelerating community housing should be a priority.
Examining is the Federal Lands Initiative. In the lead up to the 2017 National Housing Strategy, we had identified this program as holding great potential for incentivizing affordable housing development for the very simple reason that all housing projects start with land. Following the announcement in the 2017 National Strategy that the program would be expanded to $200 million over 10 years, CHRA has provided additional recommendations in terms of how this program could be strengthened. Notably, we have argued that the Federal Lands Initiative could be dramatically improved if its mandate were to be expanded to include acquisition of provincial, territorial, municipal, even private sector lands, which could be subsequently transferred to affordable housing providers or land trusts, just like federal lands currently are. So in other words, the Federal Lands Initiative could be styled almost as a mirror to the Rapid Housing Initiative, which does allow for the acquisition of existing properties, only in this case it would be for land. Given that a great deal of surplus federal lands are not conducive to building affordable housing, for example, they may not be located near mass transit, expanding the mandate of the Federal Lands Initiative is a logical means to making the program more meaningful. So, Mr. Chair, in conclusion, these two programs, they're not silver bullets. They won't solve the housing crisis, but they are welcome tools, and they're in that they are proverbial tools in the proverbial toolkit. So thank you very much. Merci encore.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Mr. Burke for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on behalf of the Canadian Real Estate Association's some 150,000 members, I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to provide our thoughts on the government's Housing Accelerator Fund. And I'm delighted to be here with Jeff and Simon, because I think it's vital to hear from advocates from across the housing spectrum. Housing is a long-term asset that provides a safe, sustainable, and quality environment for families. Beyond the physical importance of housing, shelter, it is equally important to recognize the social, psychological, and cultural value of housing. Significant research exists today as evidence that secure housing positively impacts a person's social and mental well-being, resulting in broader benefits to society. With our over 70 years in the housing market, we have seen firsthand that stable and affordable housing has a positive impact on families and communities. However, as we are all aware, Canada is currently experiencing a housing crisis due to a lack of adequate housing across the housing spectrum. And given our role in the housing industry, we believe our members are in a position to help advocate for families and communities to find housing solutions and ultimately fulfill the dream of homeownership. Our organization is encouraged by the government's response to the housing crisis by creating the Housing Accelerator Fund. It will provide cities with tools to speed up housing construction, which is needed. CREA would like to see the Housing Accelerator Fund be used in part to promote innovative residential construction, to encourage infrastructure bilateral agreements, and provide incentives for local communities to boost supply. First, we recommend the federal government prioritize research that would lead to a better understanding of the precise nature of the supply problem in Canada. There is no one housing market in Canada, and the issues facing people in remote areas are very different than the ones in the Greater Toronto area. We have significant data and expertise that we are willing to share as part of an effort to identify housing needs across Canada, but we cannot do this alone. We need to understand the problem in greater detail before we can be successful in introducing solutions and allocating capital and other resources. Data can help identify relevant neighborhoods and types of housing needed to introduce housing options that are compatible in scale with single-family homes, what we often refer to as the missing middle. Data can also help identify skills and labor gaps so that appropriate strategies can be deployed to address them. Second, we recommend that innovative development be used as a criterion for support from the Housing Accelerator Fund. By innovative development, we mean innovation in construction methods and materials that allow homes to be produced more quickly, cost effectively, with greater resiliency and energy efficiency that will contribute to Canada's climate goals. We need innovation in the way the workforce and businesses involved in home building are organized to make the industry more efficient. There should be greater use of manufactured homes, factory-built homes using advanced technologies and materials, computer-assisted design and robotics. These are needed if we hope to reduce time to market, enhance quality, and increase productivity. And the federal government can play a role in fostering this innovation and ultimately producing an exportable suite of products. Finally, cities and municipalities must be incentivized to address NIMBYism, to streamline planning and approval processes, and reduce fees and charges that are impediments to increasing housing supply. That's why this fund is so important, and I agree entirely with Jeff, and I think they've got some great ideas. I also believe we need to radically alter exclusionary zoning. Restrictive zoning drives all the other barriers to renovation and new building. We need to allow for missing middle housing in areas traditionally zoned for single-family housing, especially in high-demand urban neighborhoods. And this is urgent. When the federal government invests in the infrastructure needed to build housing units, including telecommunications, roads, sewers, water, they enable new housing, but also pave the way for enhanced business productivity more broadly. It seems well understood that a lack of housing supply is the problem facing policymakers. The role of innovation, I believe, is less understood, but it offers the opportunity to significantly improve the way we deploy scarce resources to address our housing needs. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. We're going to have one round, 5 minutes each, beginning with Mr. Dalton. You have the floor.
Merci tout le monde pour votre témoignage. C'était très intéressant.
Thank you for your testimony.
And one of the challenges there is that we have a lot of old stock rental apartments. Actually, very little was built since about the 1970s. They were purpose-built rentals, and they're on the private sector. It seems like there has been a real tension with those that have invested, have made the buildings with rent controls, and so they're not willing to do maintenance or improvements. And there's been very little stock that's been built since then. So I know that there is that tension between those that build it on the private sector and also the affordable housing. So I'm just wondering, how do we navigate this tension of being able to provide that the affordable housing and at the same time have incentives for the private sector to involve, to actually invest? I mean, it's easy to say, well, the government can do this, the government can do that, but we want to get the private sector involved and individuals involved in investing. So how can we do that as far as some of the rent controls, and at the same time really incentivize individuals to make affordable housing? Any ideas? No one's jumping.
Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair, very briefly, I think it's a question of doing both and then some and all of the above. The fact is that, as Michael alluded to, housing is in a state of crisis across the spectrum, from homelessness right through to affordability in the market space. So it's not a matter of choosing either or, of choosing market or non-market. It's really a function of all of the above. Through the Accelerator Fund that you're studying, I think we hope that will help improve some of those processes designed to get housing actually to get the construction started. As I mentioned in my remarks, we do hope that it prioritizes the affordable sector, because it does have more complex needs than perhaps market housing does. But at the end of the day, it really has to be an all of the above situation, because the crisis that we're in simply requires sort of all hands on deck. And so making choices is difficult. It really has to be an all of the above mechanism.
Anybody else want to step in?
Yeah, just we do have with our association created. We are operating funds, $200 million funds, who are trying to acquire private sectors housing to make sure to transform them in community housing. So we take them out of the market. We take them out of the speculation, and we make sure that they'll be in good condition and make sure that the rent won't be high, because the people who live there will decide and will put the money to make sure their house, their apartment are okay and well fun, and they have association to make sure to help them manage those housing. So one of the big solution is take those housing who are not, who needs love, you know, they've been abandoned or mistreated, and take them out, make renovation, make them social housing, community housing, and make sure they're not in the market, and lower the pressure for the people on the market. And those funds are made with the union fund, they're made with the foundation, they're made with the CMHC, they're with this SHQ. So a lot of people, we're getting more people from the private sector to fund those acquisition and make sure that we have a different intervention on the way to get nice, good housing and durable housing lower cost.
Merci beaucoup. I'll go on to the next question. So this might be more for the Canadian Real Estate Association. So just wondering the percentage of Canadians that own versus rent, and of those that own, what percentage have mortgages as opposed to owning outright? And then piggybacking on to that would be the challenges with the current government programs to help first-time buyers to get into the market.
So the number of people that own in this country is, somewhere in the high 60s percent. But I think that number doesn't really tell the whole story, because one of the reasons that we've had such a hot market lately, and I kind of want to discount the 2 years of COVID, because that was a bit of an anomaly. Don't forget that there was a very active real estate market before then. And the reason is that there is a significant amount of new demand.
Mr. Burke, could you provide the answer in written to the committee? We're running out of time, and it is a valid question. If you could provide written answer to Mr. Dalton, it would be good. Now, Mr. Van Bynen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've agreed to share my time with Mr. Morris, so I would ask that you'd interrupt me at 2.5 minutes. I have two questions, and I would ask the respondents to be very brief. The first one is the Real Estate Board. You're talking about the missing middle. The missing middle, what type of housing stock is that? Just a brief answer, semis, rental?
4-plexes, 5-plexes, 6-plexes, duplexes, things that better use a footprint than a single-family home.
Thank you. My next question is to Mr. Morrison, and that is, I like the idea about acquiring other properties. Are there any examples when you're saying that this fund should not just deal with the federal lands, but there should be a provision in this to acquire other properties like school properties, municipal properties, etc. Are there any examples, Mr. Morrison, that you could provide us that have been effective?
Not necessarily at the federal level, but perhaps in writing, due to time, we can send some examples of some similar provincial programs that do that sort of land transfer, and send those to the clerk.
Is that the funds from the accelerator be utilized to acquire land from other levels of government in order to advance the federal project? Is that Is that the intent?
Sorry, to clarify, what I was referring to was the Federal Lands Initiative. So in other words, to expand its mandate so that it could serve as the vehicle by which provincial, municipal, private sector lands could be acquired and then distributed to affordable providers. So it would be the FLI that would be the mechanism, and we can provide some models at a provincial level of other programs doing similar things.
30 seconds. All right, I'll cede my time over to Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Van Bynen. I've got two questions for Mr. Morrison. First of all, thanks for your leadership and that of your members as well, in particular for your advocacy for the Housing Accelerator Fund to have a greater emphasis on projects that prioritize nonprofit housing. My first question is on your recommendation with respect to pushing back on NIMBYism. I'm thinking about groups across the country. In my community, for example, Waterloo Region, Yes in My Backyard is a grassroots organization that advocates for more accessible and affordable housing in Waterloo Region. To what extent do you think it would be constructive to allocate funds for municipalities to then deliver through to community groups like this? Is that part of what you were suggesting? What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. That's precisely the kind of flexibility, but also the kind of focus that we would hope the Accelerator Fund could take with respect to NIMBYism. The whole YIMBY movement, the Yes in My Backyard movement, whether that be through nonprofit groups, NGOs, or municipalities themselves, we would hope that there would be some flexibility that would allow those various projects and initiatives that are specifically designed to really take NIMBYism, move NIMBYism to YIMBYism, that those be allowed to be funded, because there's no question that NIMBYism is a huge barrier to getting projects delivered.
Fantastic. Thanks for your advocacy on that. It's certainly something I'll encourage the committee to consider in their recommendations for the Housing Accelerator Fund. My second question is in my community, one of the big challenges is the supply of housing needing to meet our needs, and specifically family-oriented 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units as opposed to simply 1 bedroom options. Any recommendations you'd have for the committee in terms of how the Housing Accelerator Fund can help address the need, particularly when it comes to building nonprofit co-op housing, for example, and how critical that is to be providing the kind of supply we need, the supply for whom? For families.
I think it's important to recognize the Accelerator Fund in no way, shape, or form is meant to be a sort of silver bullet that will address the direct supply needs. It does not cover construction costs. It doesn't cover the renovation costs that were mentioned in the previous question. The Accelerator Fund really needs to work in tandem, and by the way, to be stackable with other more direct supply measures, such as the co-investment fund, such as the rental construction financing initiative that the minister referenced. At the same time, those programs, and it was you had this conversation with the minister in the previous round, those programs absolutely need to be improved in terms of how people can apply to them, their simplicity, the timeframes in which approvals are granted. So there needs to be a complementarity between the Accelerator Fund and the direct supply programs that are in place. But I think to look to the Accelerator Fund to meet those supply challenges in Waterloo and elsewhere is probably not the right place. It's meant to complement, but it certainly won't address the problem directly.
Thank you.
For 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. This is so helpful because right now the committee has to examine a new fund. And we're looking at it with you, the witnesses. We're looking at the various options provided under this fund. It is a $4 billion fund, after all, over 5 years. It's a considerable amount of money. But we're a bit like you. We're wondering what the true needs are and how should we target that money to make sure that we meet with the current needs. And currently, according to the witnesses we've heard, and I'll be speaking to Mr. Simon here, I'll put the question to you rather. First of all, I'd like to commend you for what you're doing in Quebec at your association. And I asked a question to the minister earlier. And I also asked him about the neighborhoods. And Mr. Sion, he said that all you have to do is that if you simply boost the housing supply, that won't work. What we need is more affordable housing, and more specifically, we need more affordable renting housing stock. If we want to act on demand, well, it seems to me that this would be desirable because this program seems to be more focused on the supply. And I don't know what your viewpoint is, but in closing, allow me to say, and I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Simon, just a minute. I'm from Blainville, and we had a poverty table, a housing table, where we built 40 units of community housing in Boisbriand. It was an absolute struggle, but it is quite extraordinary now. And we also have this NIMBYism phenomena in the province, but I think that's a win-win, not only in terms of the cost of affordable housing, but because people take ownership of it afterwards. So it's a good model, and I believe that we need to invest more in community housing. Thank you. Thank you for that question. But what matters in developing housing is that we need to ensure that this starts at the foundation and that the state, the government, their programs can truly support community needs and not leave it up to the market and leave it up to initiatives to simply say, yes, we're going to put a bid and we're going to make money. And this is the project we have in Quebec. This was based on the participation of the Quebec government, the municipalities, and as well as by the group. This is a co-funding model. The cooperative, nonprofit organization and private organizations don't finance this at 100%. We finance community organizations. And so it's difficult for us to have this ecosystem recognized by other cooperatives and nonprofit organizations, to have them recognize that we do have a winning recipe there and to apply to the rest of Canada. We don't have any direct money that flows through us. We don't have a program that enables us to work with promoters and the communities. For example, in a given riding, when we see needs, we identify needs in a municipality, we develop a project, then we put a request to the government to see whether or not we can get funding. And this should be 50% funding provided by Quebec, then 15% by the municipalities. And if the federal government gets involved, we will do better, we will do more. So it's important to be able to count on a network of promoters. As you see, developing housing, we've seen it all, is complicated. It requires people as well who are passionate about people's needs and who don't have as an aim to build and make money on the building. We have to be successful in demarketing, if you like, the housing, building of housing. And that's important. And we've been developing this model for 40 years in Quebec, and it is working. And maybe we could use that in different programs as well. But just one last question, Mr. Simon. Similarly, we've spoken about federal lands, excess lands that could free up a lot of land for development of housing. Do you have an opinion on that? Because some have said that these federal lands could be used to build community housing. Well, yes, but that isn't a magic bullet. Because, after all, we had to develop an acquisition fund, and we worked this with Mr. So we have a Quebec Development Fund where we had to develop a fund so that we could acquire market opportunities while we're waiting for programs to fund this. And if the government makes these lands available, which would be great because the municipalities also in Quebec just received the right of first refusal to say that, no, this is important land for us, it's important to us, and we can now purchase that land once it comes up for sale. So we'll see integrated action by municipalities based on community needs, because building on a community level is an important economic lever.
Social. Merci. Madame Chabot. Madame Zerillo for the last 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to start by asking if I could just get those couple of seconds back. Just going to ask by asking Monsieur Simon, you mentioned, well, we're talking about getting affordable housing built faster. That's what I'd like the Accelerator Fund to be for. So you mentioned there's 10,000 not completed units because there's no funding, no money, and partnership with CMHC. I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit more of how this government could help to get those 10,000 units completed with some funding, and what the partnership with the CMHC needs to look like to get the housing to the market or to the communities faster.
Well, a good example is that with the RHI that's been the money that's been spent in Quebec, the agreement is that we had a lot of project that were responding exactly to the needs that the program wanted. So we took the money, and the Quebec government didn't index the amount of money to realize the project, so they were all underfunded. And the money of the federal government made the difference of making sure that those projects were viable. So it didn't take time to do it because they were on the table, they were already there. And on the first wave, most of them were like just waiting for that amount of money to go on and be built. The second one, a couple of projects were totally out of a program because some motel, hotel, or different kind of building could be transferred within a year, but it's really, really tough. So we need to make sure that we don't have that anymore. People who are building the group, the pressure for making sure that you have to spend the money within a year, and making sure that the city's in, and making sure that all the regulation is passed is almost impossible. We can do it, but everybody's burned at the end, even the group that we're supposed to help. So that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that this money goes to fund the project, not making a couple of programs that are going all together. We want one program that will make sure that from beginning to stop, we will build those housing to help the needs of the community.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to go to Mr. Morrison next, and just kind of following on that, ability for the project to go from front to back quickly. I mean, I do think that the politicians have a place to play here, and around, the lack of courage among politicians. I think about SIMBYism, strategy in my backyard. The community groups don't have the gavel. These politicians have the gavel. They have the ability to fast track and make these decisions. So I'm going to pivot to Indigenous housing on that, Mr. Morrison, because I know that you do a lot of work, and your organization does a lot of work on Indigenous housing. And we know that Indigenous community groups are ready to build housing. They have strategies to build housing. They're ready to go. They too can't get the funding, and infrastructure not available to them. So if you wouldn't mind sharing how this Accelerator Fund could actually help to get some accelerated housing available, or infrastructure even, for Indigenous communities for housing.
Ms. Zerillo, as I think you know, our association has an urban Indigenous housing caucus made up of urban Indigenous housing providers. We were so disappointed in the 2022 budget that the Urban Rural Northern Indigenous strategy that had been part of the past two mandate letters was not fully funded. We have done study after study after study. You have done a study as a committee. There is no more need for engagement. There is no more need for study. We are ready to go with an Urban Rural Northern Indigenous strategy that is properly funded. The $300 million over 5 years to co-develop a study, which was contained in the 2022 budget. We're all still scratching our heads trying to figure out, why do we need 5 years to co-develop a strategy that frankly has been studied to death? So we hope that a funding announcement for such a strategy will be forthcoming very shortly. We're continuing to have discussions with various officials, but there's frankly no more barriers to getting that strategy in place. We are completely ready to go. If the Accelerator Fund can help with that strategy, fantastic. But frankly, there is nothing preventing us from getting and moving on an urban Indigenous strategy other than the announcement of it by the federal government.
Thank you,
Madame
and
Zerillo, your time has expired. I would like to thank the witnesses for attending today and answering the questions for the committee members. Committee members, before we adjourn, Madame Ferrata.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'aurais une demande.
Thank you. I have a quick request to make for the members of the committee. We've heard a number of witnesses. And one of the issues that I haven't heard many witnesses speak to and perhaps would warrant another meeting would be to hear witnesses on a female perspective, the point of view of women and Indigenous communities with respect to the study that we're conducting on the Housing Accelerator Fund for municipalities. And I would like to obtain agreement by the members of the committee to send invitations so that we could take into account those perspectives that in my mind seem to be quite important.
Je pense que peut-être une heure.
Perhaps an hour would be sufficient.
Well, you had the discussion, that's what I was looking for. I need direction. You'll see from the calendar next Thursday. We were to conclude the witnesses on Monday and then move to drafting instructions on the Housing Accelerator. So we have a request to schedule another 1 hour meeting with witnesses that would have to be provided quickly. Is there an agreement from committee?
Okay.
Okay. Madame Chabot?
Oui.
Yes. Okay. Madame Zarrillo, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really appreciate that intervention from the member. I can remember on one of the witness days, it was almost the end of the testimony before we heard from even one woman. But I would like to ask if the member would be open to also adding, I'd like to hear from people with disabilities at this time too. We know that they've been negatively impacted by the loss of accessible housing, and if we could add that to that day.
Okay, so do we have, I'm sensing agreement, unanimous consent that we will schedule another 1 hour session to hear from witnesses as articulated by Madame Martinez-Ferrada, and we'll fit that in. That may influence the drafting instructions, and we'll discuss that further on Monday. We have more time. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, members.